Right, you do the intro, love.
Friends, let's discuss. We've had a week of local elections and the Hantavirus has been part of the headlines recently. So we brought in some special guests to celebrate our 10th episode. Our in real life friends, Stephanie, who is an abundantly talented architect.
Hello, nice to be here. Nice to be here.
And our university friend, who has a background in pharmacology.
Yes, I'm Kurt. Hello, everyone.
So, as always, we like to start the podcast with just asking people, how are you? So, Miss, and as we said.
Yeah, I've been really good, honestly. Well, I'm here with you guys, which has been the first time in a while since we've been here. Fabian and his wife have very kindly fed us up, which is always lovely. I haven't had any strange sandpiper dreams as well. So, I'm taking that as progress. But yeah, no, I'm doing good. Like, how about you guys? So Steph's doing like a 15,000 step challenge. How's that go?
Yeah. It's tiring, but it's great. I was just saying to Curtis that I'm seeing all parts of my area and beyond, It's great. I'm walking on A roads. Absolutely, yeah.
So when they literally you say get up or stop early or can't, further stories of car, but you're actually doing that.
Yeah, or just not getting on the train. One of those.
How about you, Kat?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm not doing a 15,000 step challenge, but otherwise I'm good. Plodding along. Last week felt quite tiring, but yeah, it's nice to be here with you guys and have a chat about the stuff that we think is really important.
Yeah, I feel like it's part of that tiredness would come from like the subliminal, the love connection between you and Steph and her exhaustion of the 15,000. You're like, it's tiring me on the 50,000.
Yeah.
It's like, I've got my 1,000 to go, guys. What can we do?
Yeah, let's do something. Yeah. We can plan better for your 15,000. Yeah.
We are a few days out from local election results. And I don't know how to set this up. I guess one of the interesting things for me was just how it all panned out in terms of the pre-media noise around reform versus the actual results that we can all now see. And I think this might be a good time to introduce Steph, having had the experience of actually meeting reform councillors. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
What was that like pre-election? How did you expect it to go? And post-election, how do you reflect upon those conversations and how it all went?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So we're doing a lot of work in a borough in East London, and it's very diverse, but it's really deprived, and there's a real socio-economic, difference across the borough, but it is a place that feels quite neglected. It's a place that's had a lot of immigration over the last few years, and so we do a lot of community focused work, as you know, and all I've had is, we need to see reform. We will be voting reform. We need a change. Essentially, we feel neglected. We feel unheard. And it feels very unbalanced. And so as part of these engagement exercises, we spoke to some reform candidates, and it's very interesting. I mean, they came across as very passionate. The ones I met, they were very focused on trying to address issues that they had heard directly from the community, some of the individuals from the community, which I had also heard. It was very interesting. It felt very balanced, but of course, that the bigger picture, the wider party, the issues with racism and xenophobia. It was really interesting to see that at a local level. And to see how they were very much connected to what was happening on the ground. And so for me, I had assumed and I was expecting that reform would win in that area and within that local authority. But it did not. It did not. I'm in shock. And I think our clients would probably be in shock as well. They came quite close, but Labour held on. It has been very much a place where Labour has had a stronghold. And I don't know, for me, it was quite comforting to see that there's still some, confidence in Labour to deliver. You hope that they can do that. but also there's a real expectation of change, and I think that was really important to hear over the last few years. But I think it'd be really important for whoever's now elected to deliver that change. I think that's the importance.
Was there a general vibe of like, when they're talking to you, was it purely a case of there was a disappointment in what Labour had achieved so far? Was there any sense, I feel that sometimes you do have despite a sense of any sort of resentment towards you as a person or you in terms of your heritage? Did you pick up on any of that, or did it all feel like a comfortable conversation between two equals?
You're talking about
You were talking to the reform councillors.
It felt like two equals. I mean, I was quite shocked. Yeah. I mean, we know that they are against immigration. There are some real issues with that. It felt very, I keep on saying, felt.
Yeah.
And it seemed very simple. This was one person.
Yeah.
And that person decided, and that was just my experience. But I'm not sure if I was ever, if he was with someone else, maybe they've had a different conversation. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I was quite shocked. I was quite shocked. Yeah.
Because racism in England is a funny thing, isn't it? I mean, who was talking you were talking to a friend of ours who's just moved back from Australia. And I got the sense in Australia that it was a little bit like England in the 1970s. So it was much more overt racism. Maybe they would like say something to your face. Although I have to say that I was fine when I was there. I had a really great time, but it's there. Or like the misogyny was kind of more overt. I feel like here it's less sort of overt. It's kind of like said in a different way, maybe. I don't know. I don't want to discredit the person who spoke because maybe they had a different perspective. I think one of the things for me with reform, I think in the coverage that the media and the other parties do is I personally think they focus too much on the racism part. I actually think they should be more focused on the fact that reform's policies work against the working classes, because those are the people they're trying to put their faith in. And I think actually that's the worst sort of thing about it, to be honest. And it's interesting for the area that you were in, Love, because as you say, like, because it has been left behind and it has been deprived, it's almost like a timing thing, right? Because to your point, if immigration has been increasing in that area in the last few years, is it almost like a timely thing? So like, oh wait, it's not a coincidence this has happened. It must be because all of the immigrants are here.
Yeah, and it also it speaks to that idea of lack of services and just lack of a sense of care for a demographic. I think also the elections also showcase that it's not always the loudest voices, because there was a clear, voting pool that voted in, I guess, a party that hasn't necessarily directly said that. You can suggest that they also have been looking at different ways of, I guess, controlling borders, etc. But it's also interesting because, some will say this place isn't the way, it isn't the same as it used to be, but also there's a sense of vibrancy and new identity that new people bring to an area. I think actually it's about finding ways to celebrate that, bring people together, understand that people are more similar than different, and actually many people want to achieve the same, a sense of belonging, sense of identity, and just, community. I think that strength of community is actually one of the strongest priorities that I constantly hear from people, speaking to people on the ground. I think that's actually what we need to start building.
Do you get a sense that there was more that the Labour Party could have done to reassure the voters that were maybe considering voting for reform and to actually consolidate their position? Obviously, they held on, but it sounded like it was just a pro-fund thing. But does it feel like Labour could have been doing more and just hadn't been sitting on their hands, for example?
Yeah, I think for me, it feels as if we need better communications. We need to hear what they are achieving.
Yeah.
We need to hear what steps they're taking, to make a change. We need to be brought along the journey, because I think people are feeling as if there's been a change in government. There hasn't been that much of a change, not to someone's daily lived experience. Of course, we know that takes time, but I think communication after community is really important. It's like, what are you doing? How will it affect me and my community?
I find it interesting because you've come to a similar conclusion to me, but I always think that because I'm a marketer, I see everything as a marketing issue. Because it's like you're saying, it's a communication issue where, you know, we feel like, well, certainly I feel like the Labour government has done things to help the nation, but the ineptitude in communicating that has opened the door to all these other parties to sort of say they're not doing enough. More needs to be done. More needs to be happening faster. And actually, a lot of it is finger pointing. Whereas if they were in that position of power, they couldn't have done anything better themselves. In my view, I can't imagine at any point that, you know, the Lib Dems, even the Greens, even Reform, we've been able to move things along faster, given the current global and national economic climate. It's just, it's an impossible situation to be in. But I don't know, is that, I can see, I know, you spoke about this earlier. What is your view at the moment of the Labour Party and how they performed just over a year and a bit then?
I mean, I don't think they've performed very well, but I think that it's really obvious that they haven't performed well. I think they don't necessarily have the right leader. And actually, I think in any other organisation, if you had a leader who'd performed like that, no matter how nice you thought they were, they would have stepped down by now. He's, you know, Keir Starmer doesn't look like he's going to step down. There's leadership challenges. Let's see what happens. But I think actually the real reason why Labour haven't done so well, I don't think it's always necessarily due to, of course, part of it is due to kind of how effective they've been in terms of communicating with the public and, you know, actually following through on policies, or policies that were traditionally Labour have now become a bit more centre leaning, or more towards the right. But actually, I think it's just kind of where we are in society, as a society. People are really hard done by, feel really hard done by. Cost of living is really high. Lots of people in really dire situations. NHS is crumbling. Lots of things are going wrong in our country. And naturally, people need somebody to blame for that. And you're always going to blame, you know, the people who you feel don't belong here, who don't necessarily have a stake in the country in the same way that you do. People can't afford to live in the same areas that they grew up in, but they're seeing people who look different to them getting housing, not really fully understanding the context behind it. But it's very easy to, you know, attribute blame to people who look very different to you, who have different cultures and so on. And then they're the reason for all of our issues. The same thing is happening in South Africa.
Yeah.
Xenophobia, right? And these are not even people that look different to them. These are Africans against other Africans. They want those Africans from West Africa, or lots of them are from West Africa, to come out of their countries. But again, in South Africa, you've got similar issues in the sense that you've got cost of living is really high. People can't get housing, people can't get jobs and so on. And so who's to blame? It's all these other people that we see who are not even, they don't even speak our language, or our language is not their first language. Therefore, they are the problem. The danger with all of this, though, is that then we all get conflated with those other people. So those of us who are British and born here, then are labelled, well, we're just next in line, essentially, because once we get rid of the immigrants, it will be everybody else who's the problem. Yeah. Oh, you know, black people are the problem because they're so violent. They're the ones who are doing, like, you know, muggings on the street and so on. You go to them, like, what are the other demographics you can go for? It will be gay people, trans people. It will be everybody, apart from the white man, actually. That's probably, that will probably, why wouldn't it be funny at some point? Exactly.
But it's that same poem, isn't it? You know, from the guy who wrote it in Germany during the Holocaust. First they came for, and then we did nothing, and then finally they came for me. I mean, it's I think the thing for me that befuddles me with all of this is 10 years ago, Farage and Boris Johnson, Conservatives, said to everybody, like, we've got to do Brexit because the European immigrants are the problem. That if you get rid of them, then and Europe, and you've got 350 million a week for the NHS, everything's going to be glorious. Then 10 years later, they're not like, the non-European immigrants are the problem. And instantly, people warned that by taking away European immigration, you were inevitably increasing non-European immigration. So it's almost like I think the thing that I struggle with in all of this is it doesn't seem like we learn.
This is it. I feel like it's one of those things we spoke about last week on the podcast, how history isn't taught properly in GCSE 11. I think the politics needs to be a compulsory subject. So we have like at a base level understanding of how politics work. So we're talking about a local election, but so quickly move into national issues.
Yeah.
It's like, you can't separate the two. We're not an informed voting nation at the moment. And the expectation is that it's like your local council is going to impact things like your cost of living crisis. It's ridiculous. I was saying earlier that, you know, the Green Party has been successful, and I think the Green Party has stood for a lot of really positive things. But essentially the Green Party stood on things like corporation tax for, you know, the wealthiest in our society, and pro-Palestinian anti-war issues. No, those are really local issues, yet in London, that's what everybody voted for. So you've got this weird disconnect where the Green Party, which was about, you know, environment, hasn't mentioned environment. But this is how they noticed, or I guess most quickly responded to driving forward their current success. Sorry, I know what to do.
No, I was just going to say, like, if we're all honest, because I'll be honest, right? When I went into that ballot box and I was doing my crosses, I was looking at the names and being like, oh, yeah, David. Oh, cool, David. He's the Lib Dems. Oh, Jennifer. Oh, Jasmine. Oh, she's good. Great. Like, I couldn't actually tell you because I really didn't see that much. I don't know if you guys did. Like, did you know the exact policies of all of the different councillors that were up and what they stood for? And because I didn't really see it. I just know that the council that we supported won again because we've seen what they do and we wanted to keep that consistent.
I was in a weird situation where, like, I sort of did take the time to sort of look at the local manifestos of each of the party. And then I said, but I'm going to vote for this party because this party has run the borough well, and I don't want the other party to get in. And then I started running this council. So it was like, yeah, the local manifestos were good, and actually Lib Dem manifesto stood out being one of the better ones. I couldn't chance voting for Lib Dem because what if reform got in as a result of that? So it was a weird situation. Did you guys just look at your local manifestos?
Well, I guess for me, so our area is Tory, and has been for a really long time. So I kind of know everything there is to know about, you know, what they're proposing for our area, and so on. So for me, that was really easy. I guess we have less engagement with Lib Dems and Greens in our area because we've just been a Tory stronghold for such a long time. And then we've had some reform engagement as well, more recently, but I guess with these local elections. The Tories and reform, I fully understood. Lib Dems and Greens, top level, yes. I wouldn't say I could tell you like what each of those individual candidates stood for, but yeah, I guess like you, I was making my votes based on the party rather than the individuals. But I think because I know so much about the Tories and reform, just because of their level of engagement in our area, it was an easier thing for me to do. Like I had some guidance around, well, this is how I'm going to vote. And also, I guess, even though these are local elections, I think all of us actually are probably voting with that kind of national landscape in our minds on what does this actually mean for, of course, we don't, like, you can't necessarily link a local election to general election. But I do think everyone is kind of thinking in that direction. Yeah. Even when I heard Nigel Farage talking about, you know, how important this was for reform, he's linking it to the general elections. And so that a lot of the people in his party were saying, well, he's bound to be the next prime minister, which he could well be, right? Like, and I think just to go back to a previous point around, you know, comparing Australia to the UK, I think some of this is cultural. Like Australians are just very they're just open, they're more direct with their communication. British people have never really been like that, right? We always have to read in between the lines. And I think there's a large portion of people. We knew that reform were going to do well. Did we know they were going to do this well? I'm not so sure. There's a whole lot of people that I'm sure we would never have guessed would have voted reform who have voted reform for their own reasons. And, you know, I think people's reasons are valid, even if you don't agree with them. But those people will never tell you that they've voted reform, right? And that's just the way Brits are. We don't do any of this stuff, which is why Brexit was a bit of a shock for some of us, maybe not for all of us.
Exactly.
But certainly for those of us who were very much in favour of staying within the EU.
Yeah.
Brexit was a big shock, and there was a lot of us that was a shock for. But it's because we probably all have friends, relatives, and so on who didn't necessarily tell us who they were voting for. But I'm sure they voted in a way that was not aligned with our own personal values. And that's just that's British culture, right? And I think that's going to continue. This is why all of these moments in time are quite shocking to us, where I don't think you get the same in the States or Australia. You can kind of, even if it's monumental, it's still not necessarily a shock. Whereas I think for us, because people are not necessarily honest about their real intentions, because we're having to do so much reading between the lines. And I
It's a
think,
beautiful thing to wait on.
Yeah.
You know, see, like we were talking last week, so we were responding to some comments. Obviously, there are people that don't believe that we belong here because we don't look white.
You're a foreign lady, right?
We're foreign. But I feel like it's this kind of thing that makes you British. Just for me, like understanding that this is our culture. And I found this a lot when you were in the US as well, right? Like it's a very different culture. Like for us, we are generally more reserved. Like we wouldn't randomly start talking to someone in the street. Well, at least in London anyway, we randomly talk to someone in the street. We wouldn't necessarily, like, to your point, like espouse our views so directly. We would kind of do it a little bit in us. Like when we say interesting, but actually we mean like, what the hell is that? Like, what are you talking about? So like, I think that's where it was. Yeah. So I do think that to me is more about like who we are and culture. But obviously it's said to you guys' point, it's very easy. I was thinking the other day, it's so much easier to step on an ant than it is to catch a bird. And I think that's why these guys go after asylum seekers and immigrants, because they have no voice. They have no vote. They don't have much agency here because they're not even allowed to work, especially if you're an asylum seeker. Whereas it's much, much harder to go after the Christopher Harborns, who is funneling money into our country to get reform to win, or the guy who's spending £100 million a year on GB News, the failure that's GB News, just to get a mouthpiece for reform. It's so hard to like catch those guys, right? So,
because it's not illegal, right? So you can attach the words illegal to immigrants, because you can talk about illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is not asylum seeking, but as soon as you've got that illegal attached to the words immigrants, then all of a sudden anything to do with immigrants, well, they're illegal. They're not supposed to be here, because I've heard this illegal immigration, which is actually a thing. Illegal immigration is different to asylum seekers, is different to people who have indefinite leave to remain. But all of those people are immigrants. They could all potentially be illegal if you don't actually think about it properly. And I think that's probably what's happening. But all of these things, all of those actions that you talked about, which are, you know, they're a bit dubious, but none of those things are illegal.
well, I
They're
think
loopholes, right?
they are loopholes, but that's the thing though, isn't it, love? Because the super rich have a load of loopholes that legitimizes the actions that they have. So like even a lot of the newspapers that people follow, like the Daily Mail, the Daily Express, I think the Telegraph as well, they're all owned by people that don't actually live and work in the UK anymore. They're all non-domiciled. They don't pay taxes here. So the irony of this whole argument is you have a lot of people, to your point, in the classification bucket of settled or legal right to remain immigrants who are paying into a system that are vilified. And yet, if you look at the relative proportion of tax avoidance in this country, which runs into the billions, versus what we spend on asylum seekers, which is, and so you'll never stop. Like it doesn't really compute, but the people that own, what is it? He who owns the communication owns the people. You know what I mean?
It's that thing of like these non-domiciles who are immigrants in the country that they're
What
in,
exactly?
complaining about immigrants in the country that they're no longer in.
Wow, that's what always boggled my mind up. A lot of them pushed Brexit through the papers at the time, and a lot of them were domiciled in Monaco or some other part of France, or there was even that former MP that was pushing for it that lived in France.
Yeah.
Blows my mind, honestly.
What do you make of how, I guess, the media has portrayed the respective parties? Does it feel like there's been fair representation or equal representation, or does it feel biased from a mainstream media perspective?
Oh, that's really interesting. I think it's a really hard question to answer because we're now in this world. Obviously, still watch BBC News, for example, but a lot of us are now getting news from social media, and it's all based on algorithms. So I'm pretty sure the news that I receive is very different. It's probably, each of us, we probably receive different communication.
Well, so who do you think you saw most of in the lead up to the election? Which party would you say would be like the most visible party from your perspective?
I think from my perspective, in terms of the media that I was receiving, was very much focused on, government politics, about the lack of strength and morality of the Labour Party. And I guess the strength and the rise of the Reform Party.
Yeah.
Actually some humanity and strength from the Greens.
Yeah.
And the rest, nothing.
Would you say similar to you or different?
Yeah, my feed's a bit tricky. So it's kind of like a lot of American politics interspersed with Greens, Lib Dems, some weirdly far-right content. No idea why. Don't judge me.
They try to trip.
Yeah, exactly. And interspersed with lots of Married at First Sight Australia.
That's for you.
There's still something in mine's a bit random.
The first side as well.
Not my other first.
Come on, together.
I get a lot of animal videos. Actually, a lot of I've talked about the cat distribution system, so I get lots of cat videos and like crazy things that people do with their cats and dogs, like funny things. African Americans with their pets is really that pops up on my feed a lot. So I get politics.
Yeah. It's like terrible local parties.
Pies. So I have one major guilty pleasure, and that's Candace Owens. So I do listen to her. I will always stop on a Candace Owens. I know it's crazy.
You made some compelling content about that, I guess.
She made some compelling content. I think actually as an individual, I actually respect kind of what she's created for herself. She's multi-million followers, so she's very popular. Her arguments are actually quite well thought out, even if I disagree with her views or some of the things that she says about people, not least Brigitte Macron. But I find that really interesting. And it's also really interesting to kind of hear about how right-leaning people think. And what's really interesting about Candace Owens is that, yes, she is on the right, but she has some really interesting views that are counter to the rest of the right in terms of Israel versus Palestine, in terms of like government interference. Like all of these things I think are super interesting. Wherever you sit on that, it feels like, once upon a time we used to have debates and conversations about these things, and actually people on the right were not always totally on the right, people on the left were not always totally on the left. There was some common ground, and I don't think we do that anymore. So yeah, like I do get quite a bit of right wing. I think Megyn Kelly pops up on my Tucker Carlson every now and again.
Yes, I'm getting a lot of Tucker and Piers Morgan.
Yeah, exactly. LBC pops up on my feed quite a bit. And I actually don't get that much left-leaning stuff in terms of politics. I don't actually get that. Greens have been popping up more recently.
I was going to say, like, you would describe yourself as left-leaning progressive. Would you say?
Same.
Would you say it?
Yeah, same.
Like left of centre, I would say. I'm a little bit one of those. I'm a liberal, so I'm a bit of a like, but like I would say left of centre. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I would say I don't know where I'm at the moment.
Super fascinating talking to you.
Back and forth.
Between what and what, by the way?
I'm not, despite what some of the comments believe, I'm not right wing, but sort of to left leaning. But that's really back and forth. Yeah, I think it's interesting because I've felt like some of the commentary that I've seen, especially from the BBC, has put reform on a bit of a like priority platform, and my whole sort of take on that is because that's what gets views, that's what gets conversation, that's what gets engagement, and I feel like that's the key metric. that all of the channels are catering to, like what's going to get us the most engagement. I think Reform does that more than any other political party. And unfortunately, I would love to see more from the Lib Dems, but like I don't know where Ed Davey's been.
You barely get sent.
I'm not seeing him next to him, let alone Devin speaking to him. So it's like, wow, this is one of like the major parties that is not getting any airtime.
Like, if you, exactly to your point there, so like prior to this local election, from the last election we had in 2024, the big one, the general election, Reform had 4 MPs. And yeah, I think it was either the Byline Times or Good Law that did an analysis between the amount of press coverage versus the percentage of MPs. The Lib Dems had more MPs, but practically negligible coverage. Reform had a tiny number of MPs and a huge amount of coverage. So again, it's really hard to then not feel like the media, the multi-millionaires, the billionaires that own the media, they are leading us to an answer.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? And nobody really, like, even the other day, Beth Brigsby was kind of trying to ask Farage, but like, so what about this £5 million that you got? I mean, you have to, by the way, you have to declare any kind of donation or foreign funding, even 12 months before you become a member of parliament, because obviously that prevents like loopholes, right?
5 million is no small sum. I don't care like what world you're in. Like maybe the US politics is nothing, but
Yeah.
5 million is substantial.
Almost a bit like, listen, like if the general elections say maybe say 2.5 years out, I mean, unless you're hiring The Rock as your bodyguard, you don't bloody need £5 million just for security. I mean, it's complete nonsense. But when she tried to ask him, he's like, oh, no, what are you talking about? That's I'm out, I'm going. So then he doesn't ever really get any scrutiny because he always throws a hissy fit and he runs off.
Yep.
Do you see what I mean? So then people are too scared to almost ask the question. I noticed that with another Reform lady, that hideous woman, I forget her name. Andrea Jenkins, is it? I can't remember. She was on one of these, these talk shows I always complain about. I bloody hate them. But again, same thing. So one of the ladies was kind of saying, but your policy is X. How are you really going to? And then she said, oh, you're just coming after me. You're just attacking. Well, I mean, no. But we're just asking you a question. But that's how they do it. Like Trump's the same. Like, he doesn't answer. He attacks the journalist.
He's vile the way he attacks him back. It's like, I mean, I don't want to make this a Trump thing, but it's like, obviously, Lord Kongsberg was interviewing Robert Jemnick this morning and was asking about one of his councillors saying vile things about Nigerian people. And he was like, oh, this is just a smear campaign. This is just smear. You're smearing. Laura Kongsberg's like, well, hell, this is what your councillor said. Like, I'm not trying to smear you. I think this is literally just verbatim quote that just about you. It's a smear, and it's the sort of suddenly I'm a victim. Don't attack me like I'm the victim here.
But you have to mention Trump, though, love, because the playbook for Farage and Reform is the MAGA playbook.
Yep.
So, like, if you look at the real investigative journalism, the funding sources are very much the same. The Resolution Foundation that helped to bring Trump into power, Farage is entertaining and holding things here. Like abortion rights, which nobody in this country talks about because it's just something we've had. He's trying to make it a thing to remove abortion rights for women here. But that's not based on anything anybody in this country is saying, not least because, according to the last census, there are a lot less people who identify as Christian, or many denominations, to be fair, in this country anymore. So, like, again, there's such a, I don't think that you can talk about Farage and Reform without talking about Trump.
There's such a huge variance in politics everywhere. Yeah, it's kind of unavoidable. Yeah. In terms of, like, just to sort of close out this section on local elections, because I think we could talk about it for the rest of the day. There seems to be a pressure for Keir Starmer to leave his role. I guess from each of you, would you say it's something you would like to see? And if so, what expectation is there if he does leave?
That was sad.
So it's sad.
Then I think if the election results prove it all, I think for me, the election results showed huge discontent with the Labour Party. We've mentioned that these are local elections and actually you should really be focusing on what can be delivered locally. But I do truly believe that people voted as a protest vote.
Yeah.
And I think you should be able to respond. Like, politics, government, on to serve the population that they're running, essentially, or the government they're running to serve the people. And I think people have lost confidence now. And I truly believe we need a change. And I do think he should be really considering that. So I think that's my perspective.
And so a change of individual, not just a change of like direction.
Direction as well as leadership, because it's not just about him as a person. It's what he's saying. It's what he's not saying. It's not really, visible. Also, I don't think they have a clear direction as to who they are as a party anymore. People that have historically been, Labour voters can no longer see themselves in the party. And I think they're trying to allay a lot of different people without actually focusing on a clear direction where people can actually fall behind. I mean, there's so much that we can talk about on that, but I do think that whether or not we believe he's a good or bad leader, he's definitely not coming across as a good leader. And I do think that is also important in these stages. So I would like to see it go.
Hurst, you want to see him go?
I don't think it really matters to what I want. I think the important thing, though, is that if you have performed this badly, and I know that this is not necessarily his thumb performing badly because, we're talking about local elections, but essentially, it's just point around this being a protest vote. Section for me is that people don't have faith in the Labour Party. As a politician, you serve the people. If you feel like actually I'm not serving the people, regardless of how passionate I am, how much I care, maybe there's a point when I should step aside to preserve the Labour Party that I so strongly believe in, so somebody else can come in and, take us where we need to get to. So there's something about positions of power, and particularly individuals, they never want to let go of that power. And then they convince us of all the reasons why they can't just walk away. Keir Starmer said, I'm not just going to walk away because obviously he doesn't want to leave the Labour Party in disarray. And, the best thing he thinks is he should be doing is to kind of get Labour back on track. He's taken full responsibility, I think he said, for these losses. But you've never heard Keir Starmer apologise. You will never hear somebody like that apologise, a particularly ill person that just will stay in charge, never apologise, and defend. But what about the Labour Party, and what about the people that you're serving? It's not really about him. So it doesn't matter what I think. But if I was Keir Starmer, I would be thinking, what should I do for my party and the people that we're serving? And maybe that thing might be to step aside because clearly we're not doing very well. The number of seats that they lost is quite staggering. It is quite staggering. So I just think that at some point somebody has to do some reflection. So, pride has to be put aside, egos have to be put aside. And if you want the Labour Party to survive, I do think you have to kind of hold your hands up and just be like, maybe I'm not the best thing for the Labour Party, particularly when other people, very senior ranking people, are telling you, you're not the best thing for us, right? How long do you want to drag this out? So anyway, let's see.
Yes, I don't know if you want to go first or...
You go first, sir.
I guess I'll probably take the other side. I'll probably say, yes, local elections do influence general elections. I think as a voting public, we need to be more focused on local issues. I think we've been so distracted from local issues because we only look at national media, and local media has been decimated to the point where most of us can't even name what their local newspaper is, let alone in local radio or local anything else, right? But there's no local conversation taking place. So even if we did sort of know what our local councillors are, we may not know what they're meant to be doing. But I don't know the name of my local councillor because I've not taken enough interest in it. And I'm someone that should be interested in politics, right? And I think it is local councils or local councillors that should be held accountable for the performance of the local elections. I don't think it should be Keir Starmer who keeps knocking on doors and saying this is everything that Labour government has done nationally. It should be the local councillors who are saying this is what we've done for you, and this is why maybe there was a pothole there, but we're going to get it fixed sooner or later. Simple things like that. But I think, Keir Starmer can't be afford to think that it should be down to local councillors. He should be the one that's sort of making sure there's a strategy in place to support how the local elections go and make sure they goes in his party's favour. And I also think there's this weird thing of sort of saying, we've come off the back of 13 years of Conservative government. There was a massive movement to the Labour Party because Conservatives have been so poor. Was it like 5 PMs in 4 years, something ridiculous like that? And so there's this constant shifting of who's running the country, and we're never happy. And so I think there's more to it than just sort of saying, we need to change, we need to change, we need to change. It's not like in Arsenal, right? Most of the top teams in the Premier League have had their manager for a number of years. It's actually the ones that are shifting manager multiple times are the ones that tend to suffer most because there's no continuity, no consistency. It's like to see out. And it's sort of, so it's one of these weird things where I think, stability actually holds a huge amount of value. Yeah, in politics, given everything's going on nationally and internationally, there's not a lot of time at all. And there's only so much that Keir Starmer can influence. And I think we're expecting a lot of someone who has done things like, scrapping the child benefits, had like a rise from day one, which wasn't a thing. Like all of these things are making a difference to people, but we're just not seeing it because, again, go back to me being a marketer and seeing everything because often it's support communications and media is focusing on the negatives because that's what drives engagement. So I would be maybe, the contrarian in all of this, which I quite like playing that role, I do admit. But I was saying, we need to give the guy more time. This, comparisons to, I think, if one in, someone was on the news, I think Catherine West was on the news talking about how, it's difficult to school and you have been run this badly with the head teacher. And I'm like, you can't compare level of country to running the school. It's just to say inappropriate comparison. That's where I am, but what were you?
Yeah, I suppose a few things. I guess firstly, I take your point about stability, and I would even say exactly to what all of you guys have said, that I do think it was a protest vote. A similar thing happened, I think it was 2013-14 with UKIP as well. And they didn't go on to win the GE. But I actually think it's broader than just Keir Starmer, because actually Conservatives lost a ton of seats as well. So actually what's happened is both Conservatives and Labour have lost a ton of seats. A lot of them have gone to Reform and also Lib Dems and Green. So that's the movement is shifting from a two-party system. And I think, to be honest, I personally believe that neither Kenny nor Keir Starmer are very good at what they do. I actually think they're bloody awful. And to your point about stability, for ages, right, perhaps on the podcast, we've been saying, I just think the man was thinking, no, that's not a reason to leave. Honestly, after the this whole speech he did last week around anti-Semitism and labelling effectively all British people who oppose the genocide as effectively being anti-Semitic, I think to me that was just a really clear reflection of just his real lack of having any skill in this area. The communication is terrible. And even his, we were saying as well, one of the advantages of social media is there's a very low barrier to entry. Anybody can pick up a phone and communicate with the people, right? Exactly to your point, our councillors, Labour MPs, they need to be on social media. They need to be active. Even someone like AOC, when she first started out in America, she's an American congresswoman, she was communicating to people through social media, and she told them about process. Hey, I'm standing on the steps of Congress today. We're going in for a vote. This is what happens. Try to explain to people what's happening and help them understand. I don't necessarily think that just replacing the figurehead in Labour without changing the direction of the communication style is going to really do anything, right? I think we're probably all similarly aligned on that. The fact is that nobody, particularly Labour came in on a platform of not being conservative. They didn't have a clear policy direction, right? They weren't, right, Mark? They weren't honest really about what was going on. They should have said in the beginning, Brexit has damaged us beyond measure. It's cost us, every household, around £2,000 per household, potentially £80 billion. We've lost £50 billion in trade. We've got to make ourselves more attractive. We've got to invest. these things take time. Didn't say any of those things and just cut when people were already struggling, and the working and middle classes are carrying the highest tax burden in history. Like, you can't tell exhausted people to keep running with no explanation whatsoever. They need a reason to like run to something. And all Farage is doing is making policy slogans. That's it. Like, there is nothing of substance if you actually think about what Reform have on their policy page, which I unfortunately had to look at on Friday, post URLs. They're just slogans, just like Trump, but they're not possible. Like, they don't mean anything. Like, bring manufacturing back. Like, back how? Where? Like, Trump tried it. Make America. Even the MAGA hats are made in China, people. Like, it's just not possible. I think that's, for me, I really do think communication is number one, exactly as you do. Don't just change the figurehead. Communicate better with people, change the policy direction. Don't chase, because the Democrats did this as well, by the way, with Kamala Harris. Don't chase the Republican voters. Don't chase the hardline Reform voters. They're never going to vote for you. The Conservative voters will never vote for you.
Yeah.
But focus on the core group of people that sit around the centre that are just looking for some vision and a way out. Do you know what I mean? I think for me, that's the most important, because to me, it's not even about the racism stuff, because we know it's really bad with Reform, blah, 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 blah. It's not, and I'm saying that as a brown person who's a foreign agent or whatever it is. I am just saying that as someone who sees the working classes and to all of us in the middle class also struggling. They will not improve your situation. And I can't bear to watch 4 years of this country suffering any further, just like the Americans are suffering now. Like, if you don't know what's going to happen, you don't need a crystal ball with Reform. You just need to look at what's happening in America, because they're the same people, basically. That's my long-winded answer. So,
great answer. It's a great answer. Look, we have a special guest on the show who's going to explain to us everything we need to know about Hantavirus. Just if you're not aware, there was an outbreak of this virus, which is a fairly rare virus, I think it's fair to say, on a cruise ship. Cruise ship carries something like 80 people, and has now docked with Tenerife, and those people are being, I'm sure they're being trapped, but they're going to quarantine. And I guess the locals are a bit nervous. And we've obviously gone through COVID, and it's still fresh in the memory, and people are sort of worried as to like what this means going forward, how quickly it could spread, and what sort of illnesses people could face, how the severity of. So I guess first question is, what you've heard about Hantavirus?
Well, I'm not a virologist. I just don't feel like that.
I'm sorry to interrupt you before you start, but the fact that you qualify what you're not is more than what most people do on social media. Because our objective here is running American healthcare at the moment, even no qualifications.
That's a very good point. But I do think a lot of this fear comes from, I guess, COVID. You were making lots of parallels to COVID, and, similar to COVID, it does affect the respiratory system. Similar ways I think it also affects like kidneys, renal system. But it is very different in that actually, whereas COVID is really easy to transmit between human to human, because it's airborne, it's very transmissible. Hantavirus is not the same in that aspect. And actually, most of the time when people get hantavirus from rodents that have been infected by it, but there's this particular strain. So this ship came from Argentina, and there's a particular strain in the Andes. It's the Andes strain, I think it's called. So you will find it in areas of Argentina and Chile. That particular strain is more transmissible between human to human, and that's the one that I think they've identified as being responsible for this human to human transmission. So those people that got it on the ship, and who was the original person, but essentially it's gone from person to person, and that's the thing that's made everybody kind of get worried, because that sounds a bit like what we were facing with the last pandemic with COVID. The World Health Organization is saying it's nothing like what we saw with COVID, but you still have to track people. There is still that possibility that it can transfer from human to human, particularly with people who haven't been tracked, although I feel like they've tracked everybody now, even those people who got off the boat at various points, right? So I think we genuinely have less to worry about, but I can understand why people are panicked and why it's making the headlines, because we have come through a pandemic. We're still feeling the after effects of that pandemic. And, you know, I think we now know what's possible in terms of, you know, viral infections potentially knocking out the human race. So that is very much it's very much in our psyche. But I don't think that we're facing the same issues, but time will tell. And also we have this massive distrust of what the government tells us, what the media tells us. You know, we don't really trust sources which we used to see as being trustworthy. We no longer see as trustworthy because when we went through COVID, we realized that the government was lying to us, or they were just not acting in the best interests of the population that they're supposed to be serving. And so there's massive mistrust. So when we hear this, we're like, okay, this is the beginning of another pandemic. They're saying that it's not dangerous and that it's, you know, the risk is low, but actually maybe it is. You have to have sustained person-to-person contact also to catch it, because it's not airborne. So all of these things being said, like the risk is low unless, of course, you are in a confined space and you have like close physical contact with an individual. But, you know, I guess there is a lot of fear there and uncertainty. And it is newsworthy, you know, because for something that is, you know, traditionally not necessarily transmissible between humans, seeing this type of outbreak in a confined space really takes us back to those times.
I feel like when I saw the headline, this reinforced what I would never go on a cruise.
Yeah.
Like, I swear, every time there's an outbreak of something, it's always happening on a confined space within a cruise ship.
Norovirus.
Yes.
But I think we're more likely to get other things actually than, you know, something like this it's quite extreme. And let's not forget, right? Like, you go on any of these spaces when you go on plane, how many times have you been sick when you've traveled somewhere? So, you know, we're exposing ourselves to things all the time. You know, our immune systems are pretty adept to dealing with these things. Even hantavirus is not a nice thing to get. I don't know about the people who passed away. I don't know what physical condition they're in, if they were sitting healthy. I have no idea. But really, like, I think just putting things into perspective. I mean, yeah, not going on cruises, that's a choice for individuals to make, right? But there are so many other situations where we're exposed to things which, you know, could also be really dangerous for us, depending on our, you know, our physical fitness at the time, or, you know, what it is that we're catching. Flu is still really dangerous, by the way. Flu has killed more people this year than
Anything.
Yeah. You know, and you can catch the flu just from sitting on a bus or the tube.
Only because everybody goes, achoo! And nobody bloody covers their mouth. It drives me crazy.
That's true.
Or, you know, sneeze into the hand and then hold on to the arm.
That's true. But I guess the point is just perspective, because there's lots of things that are out there. But it's true, right? There's lots of things out there. I get it, because, you know, last year, actually in the last couple of years, I have become that person that, you know, every couple of months I feel like I've come down with something. And I never used to be that person. I never really understood people who were just like sick every few weeks. I'm just like, you can't get sick again. And then obviously it's karma, right? Because there was me being judgmental. And then karma was like, yeah, I've seen you. So now I suppose you get it. Like, it's awful, right? Like getting sick every few weeks because you've been exposed to something on the tube or on the bus, and, you know, we're all taking public transport to work because we live in London.
I'm also, because I'm a big baby when I'm sick as well, so I try and avoid getting sick as possible, so that everyone around me isn't like, oh geez, because she just shut up already.
All right. Hantavirus. Basically, am I saying it right? Because I think you're saying, hey, Hantavirus. Essentially, what you're saying is you're only going to be at risk if someone that has it is in will contain room with you, a small contained room with you, and you're in close physical contact with them. Is that right?
It's actually, I think it's the physical contact.
So that's physical contact.
Yeah, it's like prolonged physical contact.
So when it's like we're all adults, you're saying like
If you're on your honeymoon.
sexual contact?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I imagine
what level of physical contact?
I imagine sexual contact is gonna, you're gonna be able to try.
But shaking someone's hand is not.
I don't know.
Maybe a hug.
Like these are places. Okay. But it's not airborne.
It's not airborne.
So I think, and does it exist in the mouth, or like what part is it residing in?
I mean, it's infecting the respiratory system. But the thing with viruses is that like you're shedding, just because where they live does not mean that they are confined to that space, or where they're like you're shedding virus particles, right?
And so I guess if you are shedding, and then this may be pedantic, and you've already answered the question, but you're shedding virus particles. Is that the right term to use? The way of saying it?
It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. If there's a virus particle on a surface, and you then like for some inexplicable reason lick that surface, are you now going to have hantavirus?
Oh wow, this is a really specific.
He said, he wasn't a virologist today.
But like I'm saying, if you sort of like in Mary's example, if you are on public transport,
You can. Because remember when...
Sorry, just to be clear, before you say, I don't lick things on public transport.
I've seen this.
But do you remember during COVID when they were talking about like how long virus particles can affect them? So yes, it's like similar things like that, yeah.
Okay, so it is still worth saying, okay, if you're like, wash your hands as you should.
Yeah.
You should always ordinarily, wipe down your surfaces as you should do ordinarily, but only if you think there's someone that has had hantavirus in that space. Like that's the only time you should be extra concerned.
You should always be doing that.
You should always do that.
Yeah.
If you would, like, I'm talking about the sort of specific concerns around hantavirus.
I guess I'm just trying to think of like what situation you would be in where you might be thinking that someone's got hantavirus. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
So for people who tend to leave that are like watching this, because we've had like hundreds of viewers on Tenerife. if they're like, hey man, these guys have been walking around our city. Is this something they should be concerned about? Or is it something that is not really going to be a problem?
So if everyone is doing their job correctly, which I believe that they are, because we're trying to avoid outbreaks, those people are being tracked. I think actually they're having to do mandatory quarantining when they get off the ship. I think it's for something like
40 days. Yeah.
I thought I read 45 days, but it's a long time, right? So it's not like they're just coming off the boat. If they haven't already fulfilled that quarantine period on the boat, I can't remember what the time periods have been whilst those people have been stuck on the boat, but there are strict protocols. The World Health Organization's got involved. So it's not like those people just get off the boat and then they go free into society.
Yeah.
They're going to get tracked. They're going to get tracked. They're going to have to log their location on a daily basis, I imagine. There's going to be protocols in place. So actually that fear of like, I'm going to come into contact with somebody, I think diminishes, but we should all be practicing good hygiene, regardless of whether there's a pandemic or not, or virus outbreak. You know, the number of times I've been to the men's toilets and I've seen
that's a different word.
But forget what happens in the toilet. Like, you should be washing your hands, even if you just go in there to grab a tissue to blow your nose. You need to wash your hands before you exit. I think when we were during the pandemic, people were doing that religiously. There's some things happens where it's like, oh, they're forgotten about it. And like people are just literally going to the toilet and walking out without washing their hands, right? And you're just thinking, this is base level hygiene. You can't do this. What else are you doing? So, I never used to be that person who was like using, my sleeve to hold.
That's
It's open the train door.
I never used to be that person, but now I have hand sanitizer. It's like if I'm having to hold on to things, I'm wiping down my hands, because actually that's quite a transmissible route for other things. Forget like hantavirus, but even cold.
I've got one more stupid question, and then I'm going to show. But if you are planning a holiday to Tenerife, if you have a holiday booked to Tenerife today, and you're going to arrive tomorrow, would you trust councillor or would you be comfortable going?
I was go.
You know what? Don't ask the question.
We got hundreds of viewers. Hundreds.
Yes.
You're going to kill the Tenerife tourism industry.
Hey, I just wanted to protect it. Okay, that's all.
I would go, but also I should caveat that by saying that Steph and I went to France. Where was it? Was it Marseille?
It was
Nice. We went to Nice in the week of the pandemic outbreak, right?
but
No, really.
it was before.
Yeah,
The proper lockdown.
we got. It was.
Oh, I got this, huh?
No.
No pharmacology. Don't worry about it.
It was, to be fair, it was before the lockdown, but we were hearing murmurs of, this stuff has been happening in Italy. And what does that mean for the UK? And to be fair to both of us, there were no warnings. It wasn't illegal to kind of travel or anything like that. But it's only when we were traveling out that we the flight is really empty. And there's maybe one guy that's sitting several seats away with a mask on. And then when we get to Nice, everything is fine. But then we actually remember. Anyway.
Okay, hold on. This is
It was a great holiday. But while we were out there is when things started getting shut down. So that actually we were actually really lucky to make it back. But my point is that actually my personal tolerance for risk is probably different. So everyone needs to make that decisions for themselves. If you're afraid or worried, the anxiety should not be the thing that takes over your life. If it's causing you less anxiety to cancel the trip, to not be in that location, just don't go. Everybody has free will. Exercise it.
And this is why we've been friends for so long. And there's so much in that, isn't there? Even what you were saying, trust in government, trust in the media, all of these things form part of a societal contract. And over time, particularly, for us, probably through Brexit as well, but Boris Johnson's government, all of their failures through COVID, now in America, the challenges they're facing as well with media being owned by so many billionaires, the messaging being flipped and altered and changed, basically just lying constantly. I think Farage lying constantly. People are just struggling with who to trust. And I think that's also why people have almost protested against the Tories and Labour as well. This even the nonsense, you guys seen PMQs recently, oh my God, the absolute nonsense that is Prime Minister's Question Times, where they just
they're shouting at each other.
Shout at each other. None of this is going to help the messaging that gets out that you're really there for the people. And I think Kemi, to me, if Stum says A, she'll say Z. If he says Z, she'll say A. And again, that's another thing that people don't trust anymore, because they're well, how does this help me? How does this actually serve me? And if we could my dream would be we have some kind of coalition of a number of parties that decide to actually work together and say, let's stop all of this backbiting, fighting, shitting on each other. Let's try and work together to try and figure out how do we create a vision and a solution to get out of the mess that we're in, even if it's a hard conversation. So my next question, if we're okay to end on this, is that okay now?
Sure.
Is, given the recent results and given all of the things that we've seen, do you still have hope for the future, for our country? Do you have any fears? Do you think that we can kind of get out of this?
Yeah. Yes, I think definitely. But I am definitely wildly optimistic. But I think the elections just show that people care. I think actually that has been proof of that. Whether it is, voting for Green because you want a change, because you care about humanity. I think actually the response that we have heard and elections have shown us is that actually we want our lives to be better. We want the people around us, our lives to be better, at least the people we care about. But I think also, looking at the way that the Greens have stood up for, global issues and conflicts, is that actually we care about children and families and societies in other countries from different religions and backgrounds, and that we should actually just be very human. And I think that is also what we're not hearing enough from some of the leaders, but actually there's more of us together to make a change. I think that's really important for us to remember. In terms of numbers, we have the power to change, and I truly believe that through I think every person counts, and I think we just need to remember that's not all on our leadership. So that's really
So, like, I don't even say anything more than that. Let's
And we're done.
You are now irrelevant. I echo those sentiments. No, but all I was going to add is actually going back to an earlier point that you made about the end of the two-party system. For me, that's the bit that's hopeful, because you know, I know regardless of, you know, the impact that reform is making, the fact that the Greens have done so well, and I know we were saying that, you know, Lib Dems not being so present, you know, where's Ed Davies, but actually the Lib Dems did really well, even with somebody who is not super present as a leader.
Yeah.
You know, I know that the various councillors in their areas were doing really well, but the fact that we have this point where we've got, it feels like, you know, I know it feels maybe chaotic because we've got some areas have got no overall majority, right? But it's good in my mind because it forces the conversation. It forces people to work together. I know it's going to be difficult because I know in so many of those areas, nothing is going to get done. But for me, the thing that I am more encouraged by is the fact that we're now engineering situations where these people are actually being forced to work with each other. We never had that before because everyone was kind of polarized or in their little camps. But now we're talking about, well, you guys actually have no choice but to work together. So maybe we will start moving back to a point where, because they're being forced to work together, you actually have to start having conversations and you actually have to start finding areas of common ground. Otherwise, nothing is going to get done. I think it's going to probably be painful before we get to that nice steady state, if we ever get there, because that's a very idealistic place to be. But I'm encouraged by that. And I'm just encouraged by younger generations who, you know, I know there's some different views on, you know, younger people and where they are in terms of, you know, how progressive are they actually. But I generally across the board, I think that there's a lot of things that they won't necessarily stand for. And again, they're forcing the conversation. So for me, I think engineering, the way that this has all been engineered, either by fate or otherwise, is a positive thing in the long term. But we all have to stay engaged, as tiring as it is. And I don't think we should be, we should try not to get too cynical as we get older. This is talking to myself. And I don't get too cynical. But I'm really trying.
I think for me, the thing is we kind of need to have a shared picture of what good looks like. And then it's one of those things that, unfortunately, it's like a corporate phrase, like what does good look like? But it is one of those things where we can't all be happy unless we agree on what it is we're trying to achieve and what happiness means for the nation. And so for any party to be successful as a nation, we need to say, like, this is what we want. I think that's the biggest thing, because there's still that sort of divide between what London feels and experiences and what the rest of the country feels and experiences. And so, you know, you can see, you know, from the local elections, those who voted for Brexit also voted for reform, and those who didn't vote to lead to Europe probably voted for the Green Party in London or some other party. And so there's this weird thing of we can only get to a good place if we, as voters, are reading, putting in the effort, like get to a point where we're having conversations with each other. I think, to your point, Curtis, the sort of multi-party thing might mean that we end up having conversations with people who vote for parties that we didn't vote for, and that's a good thing. And then maybe collectively we can start to see through this, I don't know, homogenization of coalescing of media around like key talking points that get people agitated and drive engagement. And maybe we do start to talk about local issues and how that kind of impacts the national agenda. And that, I think, gets us to a point where we can all agree on what good looks like, and then vote for the person that can lead us to that place. It feels like we're maybe a generation or two from that, and maybe it will be a young generation that sets us up for that. But yeah, you know, I think will be, the old people shouting at the sky before that happens, unfortunately. So again, I don't mean to be contrary, but that's kind of, maybe I do need to be contrary. Why am I apologizing?
You didn't apologise.
Um,
No, I think that I would be lying if I said that I didn't feel sad when I saw the results come out. Because given that their policy is so full of hate and division, reform, it showed me that quite an unhappy image of what's happening in my country. And as someone who, from literally as far back as I can remember, every time there's an election cycle, some person of colour is to blame for something. I mean, whoever it is, for whatever happened, it's every single time. There's lots and lots of reincarnations. But I think something that my mum said stuck with me, because when obviously they came here, her fervent belief is that had it not been for the welcoming nature of the vast majority of white people in this country, none of us would still be here. None of us would have built a life and be able to contribute back to our country in the way that we do. So my hope is that, yes, it's a protest vote, but it's just a protest vote to make people, like you said, like it's engagement to say, we're not happy with the status quo, something needs to change in a positive direction. And then fundamentally, the working classes and the middle classes, or the 99%, work together to say, like, we deserve better than this. And the only way we're going to do that is by joining together, as Steph says, and saying we want something more positive. We want a positive change for the future and a better direction. That to me is the hope and the vision as well. So, yeah.
It's been amazing, guys.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you guys coming and overcoming your fear of the camera, of the recording equipment. No, your contribution has been amazing, and I'm sure if anybody sees this outside of our friends and family, there's going to be people asking for you to join their podcast and contribute really well articulate viewpoints about this. So thanks, you guys.
As long as we don't get cancelled, I guess.
What are you getting cancelled from? But yeah, Miss.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, so amazing. Thank you to have our special, very, very special guests on today. Thank you all for listening, as always, and please do comment and let us know what you think. As always, we're open for discussion. So friends, let's discuss and see you at the next episode.
Bye.
I know.